what are the 49ers doing? What are the San Francisco 49ers doing? For real, what are they doing? This is the kind of question that the national media loves to ask this offseason about the San Francisco 49ers. And it's crazy that this team gets no love for what they've accomplished in the past. They are graded, as they should, I suppose, one offseason to the next. But goodness, questions like how good are the San Francisco 49ers? Have the 49ers gotten any better this offseason? How much better could they have done? So much better, according to some. These are all questions being challenged by the national media, and right now, the hate is real. It is real right now. In this video, I'm going to tell you what we learned today and give you my take on if any of this hate is justified. If you're new here, I'm Nate, and we are talking the San Francisco 49ers every single day on this channel, so make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on all of the conversation, all of the big news, biggest stories, all that good stuff. ESPN today released their offseason grades, and more hate was fired. More shade was thrown at this 49ers team, and it's specifically aimed, the ESPN one at least, at one specific position. It's not going to totally surprise you, although I will say 49ers fans, most in my experience lately on this channel, the conversations on our channel, probably wouldn't put their number one downside this offseason in this particular category. But we're going to talk about it right now, starting out with some caveats though. Offseason grading for a team that is as good as this San Francisco 49ers team is, for a team that is as stacked as we are, it's not easy. Giving a good offseason grade for a really good team is tough. The Chicago Bears, for example, they go out there, they have the number one pick in the draft, and they pick up Caleb Williams, and all of a sudden, boom, their draft grade, their offseason grade is immediately bumped by a letter. Just because they got the guy. Like, well, it's easy. It's easy when you're the number one draft pick to find a solid way to improve your team. What's my biggest need? Who's the best person in the draft? If your biggest need is a quarterback, then nowadays, it's pretty easy to draft well if you have an overall draft pick and your biggest need is a quarterback position, because that's one of the most popular first round overall picks there is. So I just want to get that caveat out there, okay? Offseason grades also, second caveat here, are indicative of a change that the team went through. So this is not to say that a team who has a bad grade is a bad team. It means that the team got worse if they got a bad grade, right? Or if the team got a good grade, they got better. That's what it means. That's what the offseason grade really represents. And in my experience, most of the time you're seeing grades A through C minus. So we would say B then would be you stayed level. C would be you got worse. I'm guessing. That's kind of where I would range it, but let me know what you think in the comments, of course. And I want to also say, final caveat, if you're a bad team and you get a good offseason grade, it doesn't make you a good team. Sorry, Chicago Bears fans. Although they did have a great offseason in a lot of ways, in my opinion. It doesn't make you a great team. You have to go do it. You still have to put it together. You still have to, the coaching has to be right. The play and the rhythm and all of the hard work that has to be done leading up has to happen, right? All of that stuff is still a part of it. And that also means that if you are a great team with the bad offseason grade, even if you agree with it, doesn't mean that they're a bad team. It just means that they didn't improve like you expected them to, or they got worse, right? That's all it means. Now, I would have thought the 49ers would probably be questioned most around their lack of improvements on the offensive line. Maybe even you could argue on the defensive line. And there's a little bit of that, kind of spilled around in a few of the different offseason grades. But now that we have ESPNs, things get a little bit interesting, because now we're looking at all of the big networks have put their grades out there. So let's just start off quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've talked about some of these grades before, so I don't want to spend a ton of time. But ranking 26 out of 32, San Francisco 49ers, according to Sporting News, get a C grade, which would mean they didn't get better, they probably got worse. That's basically what that's saying. If you're giving someone a C grade in this grading system, that's what that means. All right. Now, the San Francisco 49ers, of course, picked up all these dudes, right? And I'm happy with a lot of the guys that we picked up. I think at the time, maybe I wasn't feeling as optimistic. Now I feel a lot more optimistic. But the one thing that they want to call out in this first offseason grade we're looking at here, the 49ers had a strange offseason, starting with keeping both Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and then still drafting 2 wide receivers. And I understand that, by the way. I understand the argument at least. I don't agree with it necessarily, but I do understand the argument. We have a head coach that is an offensive mind. He's biased toward offensive players, and I understand his role is going to be bigger in this organization than some head coaches get to have in what they do in the offseason. And every team is different and in different situations, and I think Kyle Shanahan has proved himself plenty well that he can put together a great team. So when he says, I want Ricky Pearsall, what is John Lynch supposed to do? You know, what is he going to do? Let's go to PFF real quick, who graded the 49ers a C+ this offseason. Not much better. They literally said at the bottom, it doesn't feel like San Francisco got better this offseason. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with that, by the way? I don't agree with that. I do think we got better this offseason. And I understand, talking about the defensive side of the ball, there were a lot of big-name players that are gone. But those big-name players, former Dallas Cowboy Randy Gregory, for example, former Denver Bronco Randy Gregory, he comes to the 49ers, gets a few sacks, whatever. He's a midseason guy who I really don't care for him at all. I've watched him play for the Broncos. I watched him play for the 49ers. I remember the drama when he came to Denver, living here in Denver as I do. And whatever. I don't care. I understand the argument for Chase Young. He's got the name. He has the name. But was he really as productive as we expected him to be? And we also had several problems last season. One of these is going to talk about it, so I'm just going to get there. I'll get there right now. Okay. So free agency draft grade, C+, draft grade, B. This is according to Bleacher Report. This one, at least, draft grade seems about fair. I don't feel like we had a draft. Maybe now we look back and it's a little bit easier to say, no, our draft was pretty good. Look at how good Ricky Pearsall looks. Look how great Jacob Cowing is. Look what everyone's saying about how fast he is. Look what everyone's saying about how Ricky Pearsall catches the ball and how he runs routes. All that good stuff, right? It's easier now, of course, but a B would have been fair probably at the time, and now I look at it and I'm looking through red and gold glasses thinking, wait, I don't know. That seems unfair. That seems a little low, but maybe that's fair. Maybe it's fair. I'll accept that it's at least in the range for sure, right? And, they talked about 49ers finishing 8th in total defense, but only 14th in yards per carry allowed. So kind of middle of the pack in terms of the run defense. We've talked about there's some other stats out there that make our run defense look even worse. The number of times we let big runs happen, things like that. They surrendered at least 130 yards in all 3 of their playoff contests. That's not what you want to hear. That's definitely not in the business end of the season when it really matters. That's not what you want to hear, right? Then ESPN, and it's behind a paywall, so I can't tell you everything that they said, but I can just share a little bit about what they talked about. They first talked about the defensive side of the ball, and understandably, right? You have big injury at Dre Greenlaw, so you need to get Devondre Campbell. That's a good pickup, that kind of stuff. But here's what they had to say about the wide receiver room. Oh, and then the overall grade, by the way, was a B from ESPN. I want to make sure I get that out there. Apologies. And the biggest move, while we're on the topic, their biggest move, according to ESPN, is not trading any of the wide receivers. You can't find one thing you're happy about that the 49ers did in this offseason. The biggest move is not moving. That's interesting. Move that that ESPN analyst, I'm blanking on his name right now, liked was not trading wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, and move that he disliked was reaching for wide receiver Ricky Pearsall in the first round. So that tells you what he thinks here, but let's get his actual words in here. Perhaps the most notable move of the 49ers offseason is one they didn't make, at least not yet, trading Ayuk or fellow receiver Deebo Samuel. Ayuk is worth keeping and paying, and he was the top overall receiver in ESPN's receiver tracking metrics last season and is just 26 years old. On the other hand, Samuel is a great yards after catch receiver, but I worry about how his style of play will age. He's also a little bit older, a couple years older, so understandable. But here's where they get really controversial, I think. Part of the reason they are so invested in the wide receiver room is because the team also spent its first-round pick on Pearsall. Though a fine prospect, that was probably the largest non-QB reach of the first round based on expectations of where players would have been drafted. Massive caveat based on expectations of where players would have been drafted. So I understand that a little bit, I suppose. But what do you think? Faithful, what do you think? Comment below. Do you agree with them? Do you feel like this was a bad pickup? Do you feel like Ricky Pearsall was a mistake? Because it's easy to say, well, they probably could have traded up to get somebody better in the first round. It's easy to say that, but nobody knows. Nobody in this room, none of the fans know what actual options were on the table. We know that they were open to it, and they were talking about it. And then after Ricky Pearsall was drafted, John Lynch shut the door, said no more trades, which tells me that's because they were only willing to trade in the event they get probably a top 10 for overall pick, right? That's what they're looking for. And if that was the going rate and they weren't able to get it, then that's it. That tells you why they didn't do it, right? They weren't willing to go to 15 or 20, which maybe seems in my mind wildly realistic, right? So all of that being said, as far as I'm concerned, 49ers go into this season. Let me know what you think in the comments, but better than they were. I think we improved and ready to silence the doubters. Ricky Pearsall, he's going to go out there and he's going to silence the doubters. He has to do it on the field. He's going to get a handful of chances, upwards of potentially 50. And that would be a large number of targets, assuming that we re-sign or do something with Brandon Ayuk, allow him to play. I don't know, under the current contract. I don't know. Depending on how they want to work out this deal, obviously they could just let him play right now under that $14 million and say, we're not giving you 26 anymore because you missed your opportunity or you missed your window. We're not giving you 28. We're not giving you 30, whatever. There's also, of course, the franchise tag, and the 49ers have all of the leverage in the Brandon Ayuk debate right now. So I think that a deal will get done because I think Brandon Ayuk knows a deal is going to have to get done. It's just probably not going to get done until late July. Which would not be wildly surprising from what we've seen. Okay, Kyle Shanahan, he needs to silence the doubters because he's got this offensive bias and he makes leaps. Is this a John Lynch pick to pick Ricky Pearsall in the first round? Probably not. Most people don't think so. Most people think this was a Kyle Shanahan pick. And I respect that. He's a great offensive mind. He knows how to build teams around the right kinds of players that fit his scheme, and that's what you want in great coaches. So I have no problem with that. I have no problem with it. Fixing up this defensive front through free agency. You got to silence the doubters on that one too, because you have a lot of guys who we have drafted over the years. Javon Kinlaw, Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa, Drake Jackson. Although Drake Jackson still has a lot to prove. He's not there yet, potentially, and some folks are picking him as the breakout player of the year for the 49ers this season. And I love it. A few seasons ago, we got rid of DeForest Buckner. So, I mean, the 49ers love to draft individuals on the defensive front, and they did not do that. So they have to silence the doubters. They have to show that these moves through free agency and I think one trade maybe, that has to be enough for the 49ers this season to improve against the run. That's the big one. And also getting to the quarterback more often, which I think we will do both of those. I think we will improve against the run. I think that we will do better in the pass rush. So I'm excited about all of these categories. I think we will silence the doubters on all three of these. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like B is a fair grade? My gut is I want to go higher, but I know my bias, and so I'm saying maybe B is a fair grade. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know. Maybe you feel like C was a fair grade. Shoot. Let me know in the comments. As always, it's a fun time to be alive.